Hi, this is Elena. I just wanted to put together a quick video to sum up some of the things that we did at last night's introduction to neurographic art. Just want to say I'm not a super expert on this. I've been watching videos from teachers of neurographica and neurographic art, and I've selected what I think resonates with me and works for me, but certainly feel free to look into other things. There are courses and all sorts of things that you can do. But I'm going to just share what I have learned so far. So I want to sum up what the psychological and spiritual concepts underlying neurographica and neurographic art include. Some of the things, this isn't a total list. Um, Part of it is about drawing with the mind and the body and the soul awareness, making sure you pay attention to how you're feeling and breathe as you're drawing. It's about a communication between the subconscious and the conscious mind. The subconscious mind works more in images, whereas the conscious mind works more with words. So the communication is better done through images because the conscious mind can handle both. But this can be a way of stimulating the subconscious mind to bring things up that the conscious mind might not be aware of, and also to allow the conscious mind to communicate to the subconscious. So we might be holding on to some ideas or emotions or feelings that are not serving us, and they're kind of in the subconscious mind. So we can, with intention, draw things that will help to create healthier beliefs, healthier feelings, healthier ways of approaching things. So it's creating this dialogue and this peaceful communication between all our parts. It's also about developing a healthy relationship with the unexpected and with taking risks. It's about understanding that everything is interconnected and finding ways of seeing connections and creating connections. So that's just a short summary of the concepts. What you will need to do this, you can actually do neurographic art with just a pen and whatever paper you have on hand. Sometimes people do this for stress relief and just use whatever they have. But I think the ideal things for drawing, what I have found is it's really good to work with marker, and doesn't have to be Sharpies, obviously. This is not an ad. But what I use a lot of the time is I use a fine point Sharpie, and then I also have an ultra fine point. So having two is good. Working with one is perfectly fine too. The other thing I happen to have, which if you have, this is not bad, is I have some markers that here we go. I'll show. Kind of have a like a paintbrush tip, which can create kind of broader strokes, and then the other end is a fine point. So these kind of work the same way, just having a kind of a fine point and then like something that is ultra fine or more fine is good. So you can also have something to color with. I happen to like markers a lot. They're not probably the most ideal thing. I think a lot of people who do neurographic art use colored pencils. So if you have those are really good. You could also do crayons or pastels or watercolors. Anything that you want to color with can work. And then whatever kind of paper will hold up to whatever you want to use to color. So you can use just regular paper or multimedia or watercolor paper, whatever works well for what you're doing. One more thing that can sometimes be useful when you're starting out is just a small coin, like a penny or whatever. And I'll show you how that can be useful. You might not need that, and you might just need it for the beginning. But we'll see how that works. Okay, so the first concept I want to introduce is the idea of the neurographic line. Neurographic lines represent a flow of energy. So one of the things about the energy is that it's infinite. So here I'm starting from the edge of the paper and moving in unexpected directions. If my brain is telling me I need to go up, I might go down, or I might go a little bit straighter, or I might curl around a little bit. It should be an organic line that doesn't repeat itself. It never does the same thing. And so it goes unexpected directions. So there's a little bit of discomfort in that you might think that you need to go up and then you go down, because I'm kind of feeling like these lines should join. And so now I'm keeping them apart. But now ultimately they do join. And do I go a little lower? But as you see, there's no repetition there. The lines just, go ahead organically. They don't repeat. They do have to go somewhere, so you don't want to do a line that just goes back to where it came from, because this is about, kind of life. It moves forward, and we really want to be able to move forward. Sometimes in neurographic art, you have a little bit of mirroring where you see the energies going in a similar direction. So this is sometimes done. Depends on, how you're feeling. So these are examples of neurographic lines because they never exactly do the same thing. They don't repeat. They're organic. And they don't have sharp edges. Nature doesn't tend to have sharp edges. A lot of things in nature are, more curvy and more organic. There's some discomfort in this because you want to stay aware of what you're doing as you're doing it. So you don't just fall into a trance where you're repeating the same pattern over and over. You're paying attention to how you're feeling, breathing while you're doing it. So those are some neurographic lines. I'm going to show you some examples of what not to do. And when I do do's and don'ts, it's really not a, hey, this is bad. If you're just drawing and making art, do whatever feels good. These are just not things that are in the principle of neurographic art. So you don't have straight lines because that's not going interesting places. It's repeating itself, and the neurographic line just keeps doing different things, kind of like life. Life keeps throwing us curves, and so we sort of accept that it throws us curves. Okay. So having repeated waves where it's the same pattern, that can be very pretty. And in fact, I have stuff like this sometimes in my mandalas and things like that I draw, but this is not a neurographic line because it's repeating too much. Another thing that's not neurographic is sharp edges. So these are all not neurographic lines. And another thing that I sometimes see in neurographic art, but other teachers say they shouldn't, and it doesn't feel right to me when I'm doing neurographic art, is loops. Even though they're very pretty, and they work in other types of art, the symbolism is that energy gets trapped, and you don't want energy to get trapped. And what I actually found is when I started doing neurographic art, it did not feel good to make loops. And I make loop-de-loops all the time in my other art. So go figure, but it's not part of the concept of neurographic art. So those are some of the things that are perfectly fine, and no one will stop you from doing them. They're wonderful in art in general, but they're not in the spirit of neurographic art. So if you're doing them, then you're doing something else. It's perfectly fine. So let me show you a trick. If you're having difficulty drawing neurographic lines, and if you're finding that there's a lot of discomfort, in the uncertainty and in deciding where to go and where not to go, or you find yourself very tempted to just keep repeating like wiggles or something like that, there's a little trick that I've seen in some of the videos for busting through that. So what you do is you take a penny, Put it wherever you want to start, and then try to push it along with your marker, kind of like this. And you notice that the penny does not, it's very hard to push a penny in a straight direction. So you've got a neurographic line here now. I'm going to try it from another spot. I'm going to try to go this way. And see, the penny just goes places. And you start getting, sort of neurographic lines. Keep trying to send it in a particular direction, and it's very difficult to do that. So you have to kind of release control to draw lines with a penny. So this can be kind of a temporary thing just to get you used to it, before you feel comfortable just doing your own. So that's just a little trick. That's what you do with the penny. So that's the concept of neurographic lines. I'm going to bring them back now. And now I'm going to show you the next principle, which is rounding. Now the idea is, let me bring this up a little bit closer, is when you see an intersection, what you're seeing there is triangles. And triangles to our minds and to our emotions often symbolize danger because they're sharp edges. They're points of possible difficulties. So that's one thing. It makes us uncomfortable to intersect with, say, another person, another idea, whatever, because there can be a sharpness to it. The other thing is that since our drawings are two-dimensional, it's also not clear if there actually is any relationship. I'm going to show here with two markers. They could be not touching. I've got one down here and one up here, but they're still crossing. But you don't know that there's any relationship between these two markers. There isn't. They're not touching at all. So they actually haven't met, even though it looks like it. So in this neurographic drawing, you can't tell if any of those lines are actually interacting or any of those energies are actually connecting in any way. So there's this concept of rounding. And when you go to do the rounding, I found it's helpful, not absolutely necessary, but I find it easier to use my ultrafine point for that, or the fine point on my other markers. So the concept of rounding, I'm going to find a spot here to do it, is that instead of a sharp corner, say like you're driving up to an intersection, you have to practically stop if it's just a sharp, intersection. But if there's a ramp, you don't have to slow down and stop so much. It's kind of like a smoother movement. So that's an example of rounding, because what you see now is it's almost like there are little imaginary circles pressing in from all the sides. And circles are much safer. There's no sharp edges there. So then the process is to round everything in your piece here, which can take quite a while. I happen to really love rounding. I find it's a very, very soothing activity, and it should be a soothing activity because what it does is we went through some discomfort to draw those lines in unexpected directions, but now when we find these intersections, which can be places that we're a little nervous about, it's the intersection of ideas or energies or whatever, that's what it can symbolize. Now we're showing that there are connections and communication between these things that are seemingly different or coming from different directions. So this is kind of training our mind to to recognize that things can be more flowing and more organic and that there can be connections. So we want to think this way. This also tends to look a little bit like how neurons connect. So I may go ahead and speed up or skip this part because I have a lot of rounding to do. But before that, I'm going to say I do enjoy it. I have read and listened to some teachers on YouTube who say that some of the students get very frustrated by this rounding process. They get impatient with it and think, oh, I've got to go, make a grocery list or pay my bills now. Why am I doing all this? It's worth trying. I mean, if this doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. It's worth trying to get through that resistance if you want, because this is a meditative process. This is about looking at things that might be challenges or problems and finding ways to look at them differently. So it's worth trying that. I'm going to pause this a little bit because I don't think you want to watch me doing all of this. And I'll finish it up and come. So here I am again. I have finished rounding out all of these. But I also want to show you one other little trick that I have found is sometimes if I'm drawing a little too fast, I get some sharp edges in there, which is really not neurographic. The more calm and meditative you are, the more curvy your lines are going to be. But if you see something that's like a little bit sharp, you can also use a little bit of your kind of rounding technique to soften it out. Like that's looking a little square there. I can make it a little bit more rounded. And I'm happier with that. That feels more organic. So any place that you've gotten a little jittery, I find sometimes I go along smoothly and then I try to finish really fast and then I end up having a more jagged line, which is not as pleasing and not as safe and not as organic. And kind of shows a little anxiety. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with anything that comes out here. But the process of rounding can help to heal things like that. Little bits of anxiety, things like that. Okay, so now the next concept that I presented was the idea of circles. Often in neurographic art, people add circles. The teachers that I have followed have said that it's good to put circles where interesting things are happening. So there's a lot of intersections. So straight away, I'm looking at this spot here. Your circles do not have to be perfect. You can freehand them. You can also trace something if you want. It's also good to kind of freehand over the tracing just to keep it kind of, natural and organic feeling. But I'm just going to go ahead and freehand it. So there's a lot of interesting things going on in there. There's a lot of stuff going on here, so I might do another one here. This a little smaller one. So the idea of circles is that circles represent safety because they have no sharp edges. They can't hurt you. They also represent unity and wholeness and oneness. They can be seen as a representation of the sun and the moon and planet Earth or the womb. They're also places where interesting connections are made, so they can be seen a bit as if they were representations of a community where all kinds of interesting connections and interesting things can happen, but in a nice, round, safe space. And they also serve to, since we're talking about connections, they connect things more. So once you've drawn your circles, you've also created more intersections. So guess what you do next? You do some more rounding because you want the entry into that safe bubble to also be safe so that the energy can flow in and out of that little bubble that you've created or the safe space that you've created. Because when you think about a healthy community, people can come and go. It's not like a clique where people have to get stuck. You know, it's hard to get in and then it's hard to get out. So now I'm rounding all of those out. So the communication with the energies inside and outside of the circle is there. It's facilitated, and it's showing again that that circle isn't just hovering over everything, it's connected to everything. So it connects the circle to everything else. The circle is also communicating with everything. So I think I did that one. And now I'll do this one. I tend to make my neurographic art fairly complicated, but you can also make it simpler if you want to have fewer lines. The teachers do say that it's good to not have voids, so you don't have areas where there's absolutely nothing. You want to have, you know, a relatively full page. Again, that's because there are connections and there's energy everywhere and connections everywhere. So you can have some open spaces, but if you see something that is too open, you can also draw in another line or two or whatever it needs until it feels satisfying, feels like there are no areas where there isn't life and energy. I just love rounding. So I'm going to take a look at this and see if it needs any more lines, whether I feel like some of these empty spaces are too big or not. I kind of feel almost like maybe it needs a little something over there. Though I do really like it. Maybe just a little bit. Just a little bit of something. There we go. Maybe a little something down here too. Yeah, I like that. I feel like there's a little balance there. So, and whenever you've done something new, you round it out. And there we go. It actually is calling for a little circle over there. as you see, I like to get detailed. And here's another one too. But you do what feels right. Smooth out all the rough edges. Okay, and there we are. So I'm also going to talk really briefly about some of the other things that you can play with since I used this at the beginning. Um, I sometimes like to go and do some things within some of the cells, like drawing little bubbles or circles or swirls or those kinds of things. I have seen that in some YouTube videos. Some teachers do this, some don't. I enjoy it. So I've been doing it, and not to say that this is right or wrong, but I feel like within the ideas of neurographic art, you want to repeat some of the things so that those ideas are not just by themselves. I also think it's a good idea to try to use shapes that are very organic. So it's not quite like if you're doing Zentangles, there can be sharp angles in there and checkerboards and things like that, and they're very beautiful in Zentangle. But the spirit of neurographic art is about keeping everything very flowing, soft, and organic. So I'm kind of feeling like the idea of seeds, pebbles, swirls, waves, leaves, that kind of thing, organic kinds of patterns. Um, so it's up to you whether you want to add any of those to your art or not. But I just thought I'd mention that since I've shown an example with that. So when you're satisfied with what you've created, with your lines and your circles and your rounding, the next phase can be a really fun part. It's the coloring. Um, you can pick whatever colors are calling to you at any point. I'm looking at this, and I think I'm running a little bit towards the blues and greens again that I used yesterday. Last night I created this one, and I feel like I'm in this mode of needing healing and getting back to healthy habits. And to me, blue represents flow and green represents growth. So I was kind of running towards those colors. Let's see if it's the same thing today. I'm kind of feeling it a bit, maybe a little different, maybe a little more green. So the concept, let me show you a completed, thing. The concept between the coloring is not to create a different color in each cell. It's actually to create more unity. So you connect things by seeing patterns and doing them all in the same color. So seeing energies and patterns. So you don't actually, the impulse could be to color each adjacent cell something different and not have any cells touching, but the actual idea of neurographic art is to create connections. So if you see, shapes within there that come out at you, then you use your coloring to bring it out. Sometimes people even see something in there. Mine usually tend to be kind of abstract, but I saw one of the videos where one of the teachers saw a tropical fish in the middle of her neurographic lines, and so she actually colored it to come out a little bit more like a tropical fish. So if you see something like that, an animal, a bird, a heart, any kind of symbol, you can use your coloring to do that. You do want to kind of honor the boundaries, because if you're creating too many lines within, then you could be breaking it up. So you should be shading. Marker is probably not the ideal thing. I happen to really like marker. But something that works well for shading, like, pencils or pastels or watercolors, perhaps, would work well. And you can also, like, put some accent colors in and shade, even if you're just going in the one color. But the whole idea is to further integrate and connect things, not to separate them. So lots of patches of different colors tend to disintegrate it a little bit more. When you do things all in more one color, then it's more of a connection. So I'm going to do a little bit of coloring here and see what I'm feeling. And I like coloring with kind of the brush end, because that's just more. So I'm kind of feeling like a green space here. So as you see, I'm coloring across the lines, connecting cells. This big cell here with the smaller cell here. So right now I'm kind of feeling like honoring the boundaries of those circles. You can also color into the circles. It's kind of whatever you're feeling. And then if you don't like what you did, you make another one. This is more about enjoying the process than anything else. So you don't want to have any orphan colors, so I'm kind of feeling the green again here. What I mean by orphan colors is just in one place, because you do want to unify things, so you don't want to use colors just in one spot. It helps to create more connection to have those colors recurring. So what's calling to me now? I'm kind of feeling this color. This color's kind of speaking to me a little bit. Having a little ribbon here. And you know what? I'm feeling, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit more green, more of this beautiful light green here too. You know what? I'm feeling a little purple. And I'm not sure why. But it's considered a color of spirituality, so maybe I'm needing a little bit of some of that. It also may be reflecting spring flowers. So here is my neurographic drawing, all colored in. Looking at the colors and seeing that I've ended up choosing a lot of greens, but there's some things about truth and spirituality that are coming in here for me. There are things that I need to work on and invite more of into my life. But I'm actually quite happy with this piece. And it doesn't really matter whether it turns out right or wrong or whatever. It's whatever comes up at the time. So it's really about the process and not about necessarily creating something that you would want to show someone else or not. But I really enjoyed creating this, and I hope you enjoy some neurographic art. There are many more things you can do with neurographic art. You can release painful feelings, you can work with your intentions, and more. We'll explore some of those processes later. Thank you for watching.